Corla, and I commend Deputies Murphy and Smith for seeking this debate. And I do think the 50th anniversary of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is an important moment to remind ourselves of the utter obscenity and horror of nuclear weapons. If the Nazi Holocaust was probably the greatest crime that was ever committed against humanity, coming a very close second were the decision of one of the most wealthy, powerful countries in the world, the United States, and a country that would claim itself civilized, to drop 2 nuclear weapons in the course of 3 days on top of 2 Japanese cities, where they consciously made a decision to incinerate between 180,000 and 230,000, mostly completely innocent civilians. The barbarism of it is beyond obscene. And of course, the other Allied powers signed off, agreed in advance that those weapons would be used against Japan. I mean, the horror of it is hard to fully get your head around. In the initial blast in Hiroshima, 70 to 80,000 people were killed in the first few minutes as a result of the blast and the firestorm that engulfed the city, and then for weeks and weeks afterwards, tens of thousands of people more died, and of course the consequences in terms of cancer rates continued long after. So of course the Irish resolution, the role of Frank Aiken, the development of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was a welcome attempt to try and rein in this obscenity and madness that was being pursued by the most powerful nations in the world, the ones who still, even under this treaty, are legally allowed to hold these weapons and indeed dominate the UN Security Council to this day, and can effectively veto efforts by any other country in the world to rein in their activities. It is also worth saying that while the commendable desire to prevent proliferation is in the treaty, we have seen very little sign, really, of willingness on the part of those who supposedly legally hold nuclear arsenals to actually seriously move towards the decommissioning of those nuclear arsenals. And of course, many of those states continue to be part of the NATO military alliance that actually has a first strike policy in the use of nuclear weapons. I mean, the fact that any alliance could actually contemplate and continue with its official policy as being reserving the right to have a first strike policy with the use of nuclear weapons after what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is again beyond comprehension, and exposes the lie that in any sense these states who dominate NATO are in any way guardians of civilization, peace or democracy. They are people who reserve the right to use mass murder and terror against civilians in the context of war. It is also lamentable, frankly, that in that context we continue here in Shannon Airport to facilitate the use of the US military machine when it continues to use depleted uranium, as well as being a possessor of a huge nuclear arsenal that it retains the right to use at some point, uses depleted uranium weapons to devastating effect in conflicts like the criminal war on Iraq that claimed the lives of up to 1 million people, and where the consequences of the use of depleted uranium continue to give rise to huge cancer rates and birth deformities in Iraqi family children, it is quite shocking. And of course, there is the failure and the continued willingness to treat as normal states countries like Israel, who illegally possess hundreds of nuclear weapons, and indeed by doing so are then further encouraging, inciting regimes like Iran potentially to want those weapons as well. So yes, it is right to ponder the horror of nuclear weapons, the efforts globally to deal with them, but let's be under no illusions. The threat of nuclear destruction and the states that reserve the power to use these weapons is still very much, sadly, with us.
Thank you very much.